I would see them putting in, long 10, 11, 12-hour days at shifts, at jobs that they hated. They were working a job that they hated. They hated their boss. They hated their work. They hated it all. And yet they were still able to put in 12-hour days. So in my head, I was like, well, if they can do it and they hate it, I love this shit. I can be disciplined and put in the hours and put in the work.
Whether you're an aspiring artist or an established artist, whether you're a content creator or, I don't care, a real estate agent, a dentist, whatever, everybody in some way, shape, or form these days is trying to make themselves a brand. And that's because that's what the social media culture has pressured us to do. And whether we want to admit it or not, we are only presenting the best parts of ourselves in our personal brands, right? We're not including the embarrassing, messy, unpolished stuff that goes along with the human experience. And that is why today's conversation with Cloverdale is such a palate cleanser, because this is a guy who does not put on airs for anybody. This conversation is very no frills. It's matter of fact. It's very insightful. It's very honest. And you can tell that Cloverdale is Alex and Alex is Cloverdale. He is the same person in and out of the booth. And it's not very often I come across people like that. And so I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too. Are you home right now?
I'm home in Halifax, Nova Scotia, way on the east coast of Canada.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so that's your home base.
Yeah.
And I know post-COVID, was it right after COVID when you got your touring visa for the United States, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, no, so it was, post-COVID. During COVID, I pretty much just used the time to grind away and write as much music as I could. And it was, I remember 2020, I think I was putting Go to Song every month pretty much. And then in between was kind of scattering out bootlegs and stuff. So after, as things started to open up, that's kind of when shows started moving again. And it would have been Miami Music Week 2021. Was it? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Miami Music Week 2021 was sort of my first run of gigs. And then, then it was kind of snowballed from there. So it was cool to kind of come out of the pandemic swinging a little bit. And I'm very, some people had a rough time during the pandemic, but I feel like I am fortunate of it. And I look back on that time that I was able to kind of grind it out in the studio and build my online presence a lot more during that whole time.
Yeah, it was all about how you used it, honestly. And and so one of the big reasons why I wanted to chat with you is because when you had posted that video to promote This Is High-Octane,
I really wanted to push myself and push my sound further. For a while it was high-octane tech house, but I think right now we're going full high-octane just music in general.
You talked about this journey that you took, not just with producing music, but from making music that did not feel authentic to you. And I love exploring that topic, because sometimes authenticity and making a living don't always cross paths. So what?
Definitely.
Talk to me about that video and kind of set the stage for that EP.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, I think I rewind a little bit. I've always loved all genres of dance music. I've been a dance music fan and consumer of all genres. I got in starting producing electro and big room and more mainstream EDM stuff. And then I got into the bass music stuff, and I had a whole dubstep project for years. And then throughout that whole period, whenever I was at shows and festivals and stuff, I found myself at the house and techno stages every time. And I was more of my listening tastes were of house and techno. And so then started the Cloverdale project and was the Cloverdale project is a tech house project. That is what it's going to be. And I think I very much was looking at other artists, especially tech house artists at the time. And I think there was this sort of mentality And maybe there still is that, like, if that's what you are, that's what you are. And anytime you deviate from that line or deviate from that path, then that can be potentially detrimental to your career. And maybe other artists or other labels or other promoters or managers might look at you differently and be like, oh, wow, like, I can't believe they released that, like, techno song. I thought they were a tech house artist. I obviously am not going to book them for this show anymore. Or, like, you know, I don't really know if I fuck with them as heavily because they're doing something else now and they don't fit as perfectly into our lane. And I mean, there's some truth to that in a way, but I also think it's more important to really just be true to yourself and be true to, like, what you love at that time. And that changes and evolves over time. And that can encompass one genre. It can encompass a bunch of genres. It can kind of, yeah. And so I think going back to the This Is High-Octane EP that I put out back in the fall, the whole thing with that was really just saying, you know what, like, I'm going to put out some breakbeat tracks. I'm going to put out some techno stuff, all that kind of, like, still very much fits under the Cloverdale umbrella, but I wasn't going to be, like, pigeonholing myself into, like, I must only release tech house. And I think that whole experience was extremely, and still is extremely liberating for me. I'm, like, not afraid to and it's been great because I've shared some, like, maybe some drum and bass whips or some, like, I don't know, harder techno stuff or things of all different BPMs, and people have been quite receptive to it. And I even look at, like, I don't know, John Summit's a good example of someone who when I saw him, like, ripping some dubstep tracks and then doing the John-tronic stuff, I was like, wow, okay. And people weren't just being like, wow, fuck that. And they were, like, totally embracing it and were accepting of that. I was like, hey, like, you know what? I feel like there is a world where people do like, you know, different genres and different styles, and that are going to be down to kind of like both. I don't know, like me and my friends, I know all of us, we're all fans of a bunch of different styles and genres. And, you know, I find most folks that do enjoy tech house enjoy techno and might enjoy breakbeats and might enjoy some, you know.
And I do feel like it's more of the fans that cause the stratification between, like, the dubstep and the house than the artists themselves. I mean, because
definitely
you become an artist because you have such a deep appreciation for music, and that's rarely ever just one type of music. Like, I know
100%.
A big part of your background was, like, rock music, right? Like, like hardcore rock. And so that can translate. You know, I have this friend who you would never expect. She's my financial advisor, and she's like blonde and tiny and very polished, and her favorite artist is Cranked At. And I'm like, how is that even? It doesn't make any sense. But so she's gotten, like, her husband into it because he loves metal, and she goes, oh, this translates. So I what you said about John Summit, like, I feel like that was kind of like the first really big public, like, bridge crossing. But it is cool to see because, you know, when us as fans, when we come see you live, it's exciting to get something new in a mix.
Definitely. And those are always the sets that are the most memorable to me, are the ones where the artist, you know, of course, like, played their music and played their style, played what you expect, but then also snuck in some tunes, maybe some throwbacks, maybe some tunes of another style or a different direction that you weren't necessarily expecting them to go, and how they blend that with their own music and their own style and their take on that stuff. Those are the sets that have always left an impact on me and made me yearning for more and made me excited to, like, follow that artist, are the ones that have always kept me on my toes. For sure.
And I love what you said about, you know, you finally kind of broke free from this matrix when you realized you didn't have to impress anybody else, and you didn't have to make music to impress anybody else. And I think that's so real. And a lot of people, I'm not sure, how old are you?
I'm 31 now, so I'm getting there.
Same. I'm 31. And I feel like that was something that once I kind of hit that 30-year-old threshold, I was like, wow, I don't have to do shit to impress anybody else. And I am way cooler just being myself.
Definitely.
And I think that's, like, a really powerful message, but it takes age and maturity to get there.
Definitely. And I think, and especially I think when you're like, I don't know, pursuing like an online presence, which is kind of something that we're all doing these days a little bit, is like, you know, you have a choice of how to present yourself online. And I think in my like earlier days of producing and releasing music and stuff, I like thought that I needed to present myself as a super professional, polished DJ and what a DJ should look like and what a DJ should be posting and whatnot. And as I've been doing this over 10 years now, and like the last few years, I like haven't given a fuck about like whether it's super polished and super professional. What I care more about is just like showing me the goofiness, the ridiculousness, the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole process. And like I'm not as hung up on making sure that every post is like super polished. And I think that resonates the most with the audience, for sure. And people really become fans of the human being and of the person behind the music just as much as they are the music. And so I've tried to like shed a lot of those stresses a little bit, but obviously, I mean, it's still on the top of your head all the time of like, hey, like what could I post today, kind of thing.
Of course, but no, I love what you said about, and that's what this show is about, is kind of showing the whole person, not just the DJ. And it builds credibility and trust with the people who follow you, because getting a peek into your life, even if it's little things like, oh, like, you know, he does funny dance moves, or like, you know, just whatever it is.
Yeah.
It makes people like you so much more because they feel like, oh, this is somebody I can relate to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think it's that relatable thing when, if I was just, you know, showing myself flying around in private jets all the time, which I have never done, by the way. But like, I don't know, it's not super relatable. And, you know, maybe, you know, I don't know, John Summit, I like as our poster child these days. But like, I think when he like was on the come up and on the startup, he was and still is just someone that's super like, doesn't give a fuck about what he's posting on social media. He's very like, you could tell that he's just like partying, one of the ravers like everybody else out there. And I think that's initially is what like a lot of people like latched onto, and why they were down to get behind his brand, is because they were like, oh, this guy's just like one of us. Yeah.
And that's authentic to him. He is, you know, seems like he is the party guy he was, you know, before he was John Summit, and hasn't changed. And I love that, like on Twitter too, you really do post like really good advice and whatever's on your mind. I feel like
it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, you have a great mix, and there's a lot of like free game that you put out there, whether it's like knowledge you've gleaned from somewhere else or whatever. So why is that important to like your brand, I guess, to put that out there?
Yeah, well, two things. One, the music and pursuing this career as an artist is the thing that is on my mind at all times, constantly. I'm constantly trying to think of like either new songs I can write, or new ways to promote the music, or new ways to mix up my DJ sets, or, you know, designing the visual content. So it's constantly on my mind. And so just from that, I find it very easy to talk about online and easy to come up with, you know, advice to write. But on the other hand, it's like, those are the people that other artists and other DJs, and those are the people that I love interacting with and connecting with. And those are my friends. And there have been folks that have given me amazing advice, and I just want to share all that stuff with newer artists too. I find, like that's where I feel like I'm getting a lot of my purpose out of these days is, you know, sharing what I've learned with other newer artists, or even just like fans. It's I don't know, I get a lot out of it, and I really enjoy it, and it's my favorite thing to talk about. I could talk about music all day, every day. And it's fine. One of my good friends here, he's just one of my good IRL friends here in Halifax, that started on his producing music journey and started to release music. And the other day he called me up and I talked with him for like an hour and a half. I'm like, do you try this? Do you try this? Do you try this? And it's just like that one thing that I'm just super, super, super happy to talk about at all times. And so I think it just naturally kind of spews out of me on either like Twitter or Threads or Instagram or whatever. Because it's just often like the thing that's on my mind the most.
That's really cool. And I mean, that's the mark of somebody who lives and breathes music. And it's clearly more than just a career to you. Like it is part of your identity.
Oh, big time. Maybe to a fault, but hey, I find most folks in this scene are in it like full heartedly.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be passionate about something and to be able to make a living off of it because, that's those two things don't always intersect. Were you,
definitely.
Was it always your intention to go full time with music and like make this your bread and butter, or was it something that kind of naturally happened?
Like I didn't start producing music until I was 22 when I started, 21, 22. It was my like last year of university. And prior to that, I was always in like rock and metal bands, and I was always heavily into music and recording studios. And I had like a whole little like recording setup at home, but it was like from that side of things, the rock and metal side. But then when I was away at university, it was just me alone. I didn't have anybody else to jam with. I like can't sing for shit, nor can I play the drums. And so it was pretty much just me and a guitar, which doesn't work out too well when you want to write a song. And so I was like, hey, and at the same time, I was also really getting into going raving and going out to shows and really getting into electronic music. And I actually remember the very, very specific point. My buddy was like, hey, like, how do you think this song was made? And it was a Calvin Harris song that he's on at the time. And I was like, well, I know there's this software called like FL Studio or Ableton, and like you can kind of program in where the sounds go, whatever. I'm like, I kind of have a vague idea. I'm like, give me like a couple weeks. And it was during the summer, and I went home and I downloaded it right away. And like a couple weeks later, I like had a song, and I was just pure curiosity of like how was this music made, and then so that just opened up a giant rabbit hole of me like just every day learning new things. And I came at it from I really love learning software, which sounds kind of crazy, but I came from a graphic design, video editing. That was what I thought my career was going to be.
Okay.
I was studying media and film at school, and so I kind of thought I was going to do maybe like freelance multimedia, kind of what the photo guys do at the shows these days. I often find myself, I'm like, wow, I very well could have been doing that. But when I left university, I randomly went and taught English in Korea for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Which was super fun. I had a blast doing that. But while I was there, I had a lot of free time. And all my free time, I just spent writing music, and I was uploading it to SoundCloud. And it was in like the SoundCloud heyday. So it would have been like 2013, 2014. Mm-hmm. And back then you could put a song on SoundCloud and it would like do numbers, and it would do pretty well. Like even whether it was good or bad or whatever. And like one repost, I remember one time I had one of my songs reposted by the Chainsmokers, and it got like 100,000 plays in a couple days. And it was just like that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. But I think what it did is it gave me a boost of like, oh dude, like you're seeing really big numbers. Maybe this is like a potential option. Like I didn't actually at that time think, wow, this is a really, really viable career option, until I started seeing some of the feedback coming through. And then
validation for sure.
And then immediately I was like, okay, well, I got to at least give this a solid try, a solid attempt. But I knew that it was never going to be something that I could like kind of be chipping away at the side and have it turn into my career. Just because I just know how much work would be involved into like really fully turning it into your full-time career. And so when I came back from Korea, I was kind of doing a bunch of odd jobs. I was doing some like freelance graphic design stuff. I was doing some video editing stuff. and just making, a few $100 here, a few $100 there. A buddy of mine hit me up and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come move to Halifax, which is where I live now?" He's like, "I need a roommate." And at the time, the rent was $500 a month in this house. It was dirt cheap.
Wow.
And at the time, I had like a cell phone bill. I didn't have too many other bills. And so I kept my bills super, 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 super low as I could. And then I was like, okay, so all I need to do is make, I don't know, like $1,000 a month kind of, which for that first year and a half, that's probably what I was living off of, maybe around $1,000 a month. And so I'd make that in a couple of days, or however many days it took me to make that, maybe a week. And then the rest of my time I dedicated to writing music and building my artist career. And I would just make enough money to survive. And then everything else, it was just like, write music. Because I had friends that were either engineers or they were accountants or whatever they were doing, whatever career they were pursuing. Maybe it was a trade, whatever. And I would see them putting in, long 10, 11, 12-hour days at shifts, at jobs that they hated. They were working a job that they hated. They hated their boss. They hated their work. They hated it all. And yet they were still able to put in 12-hour days. So in my head, I was like, well, if they can do it and they hate it, I love this shit. I can be disciplined and put in the hours and put in the work. And so I kind of just stuck myself in that mindset for a couple of years. And, just was producing nonstop. And then, but for that year, there was probably I wasn't sure if it was going to be is this really what I'm going to do? Or am I just I'm giving it my all right now? But I think it got to a point where I was like, okay, well, there's no plan B at any point now. I'm too far into this now. I'm really, and as I started seeing, some movement forward and started to seeing some growth, that's when I was like, okay, there's no looking back now. I'm in it. I'm in it.
That's a really cool story. And I think, a lot of people can learn from that because there is a way. I always say, so I used to be a TV reporter and I got out of that business to work for myself. Mm-hmm. And the women that I've coached to help get out of news, I always say, if you can quit now and go live with your parents or go take a part-time job and live very frugally and then make finding a new career your full-time thing, you will get there much faster than if you just got home from an exhausting shift of working, 12 hours, whatever, and then submitting some resumes at night when you're sleepy and frustrated and sad. And it is so true. It worked Big for time. Me. I started my business from zero to, multiple clients in less than 6 months because I made it my full-time thing. And so I love your story because it is proof that if you just put your nose to the grindstone and you got to live frugally and,
definitely.
It can be hard for a lot of people to do that, but no matter what, you're going to learn so much about yourself and you'll learn if that career path is the one you truly want.
Yeah, 100%.
If you spend that much time dedicated to it nonstop.
Yeah. And obviously I was fortunate in my circumstances at the time coming out of leaving Korea and coming back, and I wasn't sort of in a career path already. I don't know. I was single at the time. I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have anything on the go. I just had time. So I definitely recognize the fortune that I had and the privilege that I had to take that route. I think getting my bills low, because even now, music's been my full-time gig now for 5-ish years. And, I'm making obviously a ton more money this year than I was the past previous years, but it's not heaps, it's not tons. And as you grow, the expenses grow and whatnot. And so you still got to manage it all and be, I don't know where I'm going with this, but be frugal a little bit.
Sure. Well, another thing that I've talked to other artists about and just other entrepreneurs is that you can get over that first hump and get some growth, but there comes there should come other times in your journey as an artist, entrepreneur, whatever, where you do hunker down again and kind of reinvest to get to the next level. Like
100%.
the people who fail or don't, get themselves in trouble is because they're like, oh, I have a little bit of money now, I'm just going to start spending. And they're not smart about it. And then they don't think about, well, I can't ride this trend or this wave forever. Like there needs to be the next evolution, to keep people interested in me. Yeah. And so that does, it does take the same discipline that, you theoretically started with.
And I think I'm really entering that this year. And I think a lot of it maybe comes with the switch of the sound and kind of me just being a lot more comfortable and open with, because I think it's just been the past year and a half or so, 2 years that I've been touring heavy. And so I'm still kind of getting my toes wet on that front of things. And so now that I'm a little bit more comfortable on that front of things, I'm a little bit more comfortable with me as an artist. Now I'm taking a step back and being like, okay, so like, now that I've like sort of established myself, what do I want my like long-term 5-10 year plan to look like? We're in our 30s now. We got to think a little bit longer, which I hate that I part of me hates that I am like starting to think a little bit more like that. But I think it is somewhat important of just like, okay, like I do genuinely need to make this work and really work if I want this to be like my long-term career. And, what I'm more focused on than anything is just sort of trying to build a little bit of more of a community, a little bit more of a brand around the sound, the high-octane sound in general, and making a little bit more than just me and my music, and more about like a little bit more of a movement, a little bit more of a group of folks that are kind of pushing a sound on in North America a little bit.
The community is so key. I mean, you talk to any marketer right now, that's the, business that I'm in, or any brand manager, they're going to tell you that it's not about like numbers, like we were talking about earlier. It's about how dedicated are those fans to you. Yeah. 100%. Because it's a harder thing to achieve, because achieving virality, like, video goes viral, whatever, that's easier than people think it is. But to get people to keep coming back for more, like you have to give. And that's really, is part of your like persona, is like you give advice, you give authentic pieces of yourself. And that's what keeps people sticking around. I'll ask you, because I'm just speculating, but do you feel like club, like owners and venues and people who book, do you think they understand that metric yet, or are they still playing like the big numbers game?
I mean, some certainly do, but I think a lot are definitely still disconnected from that. And it's something that I like, I don't know. I think so much happens now on Discord rather than it happens on Instagram, and so much happens more on YouTube and Patreon communities than it does in our traditional social medias that we're used to thinking about. And I don't know, in my like the past couple years of touring, most of the promoters are like older club owners that definitely have no clue what Discord is. So I do think that they're maybe missing that, but word gets out on which artists are actually hot and which artists have actual real ticket value based on actual ticket sales. And so like, so goes and sells out 3 nights in LA, and then like we know there's actual real demand for that. So I think that is probably where promoters are focused on, is looking at those numbers and looking, okay, like how well did they do in this city, how well did they do in this city, kind of thing. But I wish they were a little bit more in tune with like the community. And I think if they were more in tune with the community, they'd have a better job of pointing like who's up next, who are the ones that are like, should we give a shot to, that maybe they wouldn't give a shot to, kind of thing.
Yes, it is definitely shifted from like I feel like there's really no such thing as like discovery anymore. There's no such thing as like, oh, I've discovered this artists. It's like, no, this artist or whoever, influencer, whoever has 5 million followers already, and now we're going to put them on. Like, they want you to walk through the door with like that established credibility rather than like helping you build it. Like, you don't really see, you know, brands, labels kind of invest.
Definitely. Which is so counter to what the music industry used to be. And with the major label side of things, like they used to find artists and then pump a bunch of money and a bunch of marketing and actually develop that artist. And you're not seeing any, especially in electronic music, you're not seeing that at all. I've never seen that. And it does make me, I know something that moving forward, which is maybe, I don't know if it's the move or not the move, but we're definitely going to be doing a lot more independent releases, because over the course of, you know, releasing I don't know how many labels I've released on now, maybe 15 or 20 or so of some of my dream labels that I've always wanted to release on, these folks that I have respect heavily. At the end of the day, they're mostly just sort of putting their stamp of approval on it. And then all the grunt work I'm still responsible for. I still have to do all the pushing and the marketing, and I'm still going to be doing all of that, whether it's for them or for me. And so if there's new artists and producers listening to this, like, don't be afraid of self-releasing. It's far more important to be consistent and release consistently than it is to, like, say you had 2 label releases a year versus, you know, potentially 2 label releases and scattered with 10 self-releases throughout. You're going to do far, far better. And plus, then you get to keep it all. You keep 100%. You keep your masters. And then 10 years down the road, you're going to have it all. You're going to own it all.
That's great advice. That's really, because you have to think about, and I mean, I'm just coming from the fan's perspective, but the way music gets promoted now is on your pages. Like, yes, some labels have big Instagram accounts, but people are far more likely to follow you. And so it does rely heavily on how you're promoting it. And I don't know what goes into, did the label help make this video? Did they pay to have it produced or whatever? But you're right. Like, a lot of it is on you and your team. And to people, to fans who don't make any music themselves, right? There's different levels, right? There's like new producers, there's, you know, mid whatever, and then there's people like me who like have never ever touched a deck. I don't care what label your track is on. I don't.
I know, and that's
good,
and that's the best. That's and I think more of us artists, DJs, producers need to think like that and realize that and sort of, and I think the scene now is even different than it was 5 years ago. I think in the times of even say Dirty Bird and Nightbase and stuff, those were, and even like the Hades of Confession, those were labels that had real fan bases and allegiances to the labels, and that wasn't that long ago. I'd say 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we have that today. The only folks that I would say we have that maybe with, like, obviously Afterlife. That's like...
Yeah, well, but what's attached to those labels is festivals, experiences. It's more than just a label. That's why. Yeah. So if we're talking about that, sure, that's a different conversation. But in general, like, you know, it's cool. Like, if this is like a legacy label or it's, you know, what, but like that really, in terms of how much that matters compared to just, do we like the track? I mean, there is no comparison. Exactly. So, I think more people need to, and that's better for all of us in the long run. Yeah. If all of us can get away from labels, and because I mean, they are ultimately just taking 50% of everything. for what? Not a lot to put their stamp on it and like make the artwork. And like, if you really want, you can take the time to learn how to make some artwork. Anyways, I know it's a touchy subject, but I think it's really important for people to hear, because we all tend to get caught up in our own vanity metrics, right? Like,
definitely.
Like, I like, let me say something that's, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we're being authentic and real here, right?
Yeah.
I have this vanity metric where I feel like I interview these really, really cool artists like these impressive yourself. Everybody on this show has like been a huge win for me.
Yes.
And then I post the video, the reel on Instagram, whatever. Sometimes it doesn't do well. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is a huge whatever. Like, how are people? And then I remember, I'm like, maybe not everybody knows what that artist looks like and they don't realize who it is. And like, that's another vanity metric in my head where it's like, oh, it's just impressive that I'm interviewing these people, but that doesn't necessarily matter to my followers, right?
Yeah.
So like you have to think about at the end of the day, like, are you getting wrapped up in this because, you know, it affects your bottom line, or if your fans are going to care? If that's not the case, or it affects your bottom line negatively, why are you doing it? And I think it does kind of feed the ego a little bit, like, I'm on this label.
Yes, 100%. And like, I'm not saying it's not important. And like, if I wasn't, I wouldn't want to be like doing this, having me not had at least some of those label releases in the past.
Sure.
Because I think some of that stuff, and I'm still sending out demos right now. I'm still signing records. I'm still like in that system. But I'm also just, there was a while where I would look at a self-release as a failure, as a like, oh, I couldn't get the record signed on a label that I wanted to. And so I put it out myself. And I think some other DJs and producers and whatnot may think that way. And it's like, no, like now I'm not thinking like that at all. I'm putting my best music on my label. I'm putting my best music out as a self-release. And if like a label wants to sign one of the other ones, that's great. But my best stuff is coming out on my label, my brand. I'm going to have full control over it. I'm going to have full control of the art direction, full control over the vision of the whole thing. And I'm not, if anybody fucks up, it's on me. It's not on, I'd have nobody else to blame, which is that much, I prefer that much more.
Yeah. That takes a lot of agency. And, you know, I think that's, again, the mark of a true artist. And I think I love the mindset shift of it's not a failure. It's actually empowering.
That's it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's great advice to end on. I really appreciate you lending me your brain.
Oh, no worries. This is fun. I could talk for hours. This is so much fun.
I'm so glad. Well,
thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, let's connect later this year and
definitely
and you know, catch up on what you've learned since, because it seems like you are someone who's always learning, always learning.
Always. All right. Well, thanks so much, Olivia. I appreciate the chat and having me on, and this was a blast.
That last part of the conversation really had my gears turning from a business perspective, because I like to say I'm a pretty informed fan of this music, and I really couldn't care less what label an artist releases on. I mean, we all know Dirty Bird, right? Because of Dirty Bird Campin'. Like that's more than a label. It's a brand with a festival and merch, and there are other labels like that. But I'm curious to know what you guys think, if you believe that labels are important to an artist's, you know, credibility, because to them the difference, you know, is in dollars and cents, but to us, the fans, there's really nothing there for us to, you know, prefer one label over another. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm going to put a poll on my Instagram. That's Olivia Mancuso with 2 underscores. Let me know what you think. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, best way to support me, super simple, share with your friends. And of course, I will talk to you next week.